Hey, hello, sisters.
Flashback Mary. Hi, sisters.
People. People. The flaming kicks of King need to be matched. The flaming kicks of King need to be matched. And in this chapter, One Piece, chapter 988, potentially, the flaming kicks of King will indeed be matched. As a Sanji fan, last chapter, just can't help but get a little pep in your step. A little kick step in the morning, like, yeah, oh yeah.
I'm ready!
Who's ready?
I'm ready!
Who's ready?
I'm ready!
Sunday, Monday, happy days across the board.
Monday, happy days.
However, I do want to spend some time talking about Zoro and King as well. Because of course, a lot of folks across the board that are still on about Zoro and King. Which, okay, fair enough, fine. So Zoro versus King, or Sanji versus King, the evidence at hand. But before we get to all of that, a brief word from our sponsor. Now, I'm pretty sure you can guess. I'm pretty sure you can guess who the sponsor of this video is, ladies and gentlemen, because over and over and over again, I promote this service. And ladies and gentlemen, this service is none other than Surfshark VPN. Constantly, I promote this service because constantly this service has proven itself to be pretty damn good. Not only is the service available on all your devices across all mediums, on your laptop, on your desktop, on your phone, but it's available for iOS and Android, Linux, whatever you have, Surfshark VPN is going to fit the bill. When it comes to a lot of their features, the blind search feature is a pretty damn useful and good feature, and it cleans up all that gutter that you have when you're searching on Google. And then on top of that, they have the clean web feature. I'm a One Punch Man fan. And as of late, Murata has been getting pretty spicy.
Now comes the interesting part.
When it comes to one Tatsumaki. It's been getting pretty real. All the One Punch Man boys know. And of course, we go on some sites to see the goods, to see what the web has produced. But some of these sites are a bit scary. But Surfshark VPN makes our experience all the more better on these sites, because it's literally clean web. When it comes to, let's say, Netflix, and you want to get access to certain libraries, but you can't because they're region gated because of where you live, well, guess what? All you gotta do, people, is go on your Surfshark VPN. You situate which location they want to reside in, and then once you do that and you go into that Netflix, ladies and gentlemen, that region-gated content is now no longer region-gated. And the things that you couldn't see before on Netflix because of your region, now you can see. Hallelujah. People, go in the description box down below. Type in code KOL, that is K-O-L, 3 letters, K-O-L. And you will get 85% off plus 3 months free. Once again, in the description box down below, use code KOL and check out absolutely Surfshark VPN. And now, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, let us go on to the video at hand. So now the raid on Onigashima has begun in full force, and Luffy has declared all-out war in front of Kaido and Big Mom. He's ready to go. In the last chapter, we got Kaido and Jack the Dragon's henchmen squaring up against the Sulong Mink. We got Big Mom making some plays. We got Frankie and Brook. They're coming in very hot. All these things are happening. It's kind of nuts. But in the last chapter, as a Sanji fan, I just couldn't help but be a little bit excited when I saw my man Sanji, raid suit stealth black Sanji, come in there, save Momo, gives him a manly thumbs up, and then King and Sanji have now crashed into one of the side areas because King transformed into full-on Pterodon mode. Beak right into Sanji's abdomen, whoosh, and that's it. Now, before all this happened, a lot of folks were touting Zoro versus King. And the evidence at hand exists, for sure, when it comes to Zoro versus King. And yes, for a time, that was the one I thought would be possible among the two options of Zoro or Sanji versus King. So the first key thing when it comes to evidence for Zoro versus King is, of course, the fact that King has a sword. King has a sword, therefore, he is a swordsman. And because he is a quote-unquote swordsman, though I would argue not all swordsmen are created equally, I would argue that there's a clear difference between someone like, let's say, Law or Big Mom. Compare them to, let's say, someone like Denjiro or Ashura Doji or Mihawk for that matter. There is a clear difference, but nonetheless, they're all in the very, very, very broad scope of swordsmen. I did a video on that. Check that video. I'm gonna put it right here. I did a video on that. Check it out right here. Go to it. That being said, he's a swordsman and he's a calamity. This should be Zoro's fight. Just how when we have Enies Lobby, the swordsman of the bunch was Kaku, and the moment the strides got to the Tower of Justice, it was boom, Zoro and Kaku like right then and there, almost immediately. Like, make it happen now. Zoro fighting the swordsman of the group makes sense, fair enough, fine. The only problem with this notion is, unlike Enies Lobby, the other three major fighters of Jabra and Rob Lucci, even going down from there to Fukuro and Caulifla and so on, they weren't swordsmen in any respects. However, in the Calamities, Queen and Jack have swords as well. Queen and Jack have swords as well. Queen has 2 swords as well as Jack, and in fact we see Jack essentially in a swords duel of sorts against Ashura Doji. When Jack was fighting on Zou, we see Jack use his swords when he's fighting against Inuarashi and later on Nekomamushi. The 3 Calamities, because they wield swords, you can argue that they're all swordsmen quite easily. Even though Queen didn't use his swords when he fought against Big Mom and was in full Brontosaurus Littlefoot mode, the fact remains that yes, you can easily say that Queen is a swordsman because he has swords. So the swordsman thing, yeah, King's a swordsman, true, but they're all swordsmen. That's the first thing. The second thing is that it is assumed that King is the second strongest after Kaido in the Beast Pirates, Kaido's prima right-hand man. Now, the reason why I'm using the word prima is because in certain translations, it says that Jack is the right-hand man of Kaido. So, of course, it's a bit weird there because Jack is lower in bounty than Queen and also assuming King as well. And they make fun of him, calling him Jack the Stooge. And then Jack seems to kowtow to Queen's and King's wishes at times. To him, they are his Anikis. So, essentially speaking, it is safe to say that if those transitions are correct, and Jack is the right-hand man, then it's more so Kaido has right-hand men, where his 3 top associates of Queen, King, and Jack are all deemed to be right-hand men. That's my assumption. Because again, the transitions differ from site to site, and also, of course, on the anime as well. Now, because Zoro, throughout most of the pre-time skip, fights the second strongest, quote-unquote, of the group, if King is the second strongest of the Beast Pirates, especially now that we see Yamato, and she's an ally, obviously, like not enemy. In fact, we see her fight against Ulti, and that's like a fight of sorts. So clearly, I would say weaker than King, at least so far. If we follow the pre-time skip notion for Zoro, Zoro fight against King. So these are the main things when it comes to evidence of Zoro fighting against King. I don't see any other concrete points of Zoro fighting against King other than just those things. Where, again, Zoro, for the most part, not all the time, but for the most part, fought against the second strongest guys in groups. And again, this is a notion that's far more propagated in the pre-time skip rather than the post-time skip. Because in the pre-time skip on Fishman Island, you can't necessarily say that, because even though he defeated Horty Jones at the beginning, that was a pre-steroided, far, far weaker Horty Jones, number one. Or I should say a pre-transformed Horty Jones. Number two is that Waratsume existed, the same guy that required both Jime and Sanji, and on top of that, could knock out the Kraken in a single punch. Then in Punk Hazard, you have both Caesar Clown and Virgo. And then on Dressrosa, there is no distinction in rank or even combat ability when it comes to the three top officers, the executive officers of Trebol, Diamante, and Pika, because each one specialized in their own unique skills and abilities and so on and so forth. And according to the Vivid Card volume number 9, Trebol, Diamante, and Pika all have the same bounty at 99 million berry. And then on top of that, it was already noted prior to that it was Virgo who was the right-hand man of Doflamingo. And number two, he has a sword, and King is a swordsman. But that being said, though, when it comes to Sanji and King, it's a little bit different. So, number one, King can fly. As simply put as that, King can fly. But I'll break it down even more, okay? A lot of folks say, okay, well, listen, King can fly, true, but if he's going to fight against Zoro, he has to go down to the ground anyway and fight him in those means. Why would King limit himself in terms of his fighting capability if flying, which is clearly a major component of being a pterodon, a pterodactyl, an ancient flying Zoan, like that's like, okay, I'm Marco the Phoenix. I'm fighting against some guy on the ground. And as a result, I'm not gonna fly. That makes no sense, dude. You're Marco. You flying is a key component of your combat skills. Your flight. If it applies to Marco, it has to apply to King too, without question. And then on top of that, we're seeing how the ancient Zoans operate a bit differently when it comes to how they utilize their full-on animal dinosaur forms, where they use them far more frequently than the other Zoans, the carnivore and the herbivore Zoans in particular, where they tend to lean on their hybrid forms. The ancient Zoans appear to have more raw defenses, potentially speed, let's say King's part. Their stats seem to be the highest, potentially, in their full-on ancient form, which is why Queen wasn't necessarily holding back against Big Mom when he went to full dinosaur mode. The same for Ulti when she went to full Pachycephalosaurus. Ooh, when I got that right, damn. I'm pretty sure right. When she went to full-on Pachycephalosaurus mode, Ulti was able to actually grab onto Luffy, and then he was gonna be forced into going to Gear 4. Ulti was forcing that when she was in full Dino mode. So when it comes to ancient Zoans, they tend, as far as I can tell, they operate a bit differently. So for King, that form is extremely reliable. And if he does go into hybrid form, it's because, like for example, in the case of Page 1 in Sanji, the hybrid form was more convenient given Sanji's speed. So King can be even faster in his hybrid form compared to his full-on ancient Zoan mode. So the flight component does matter, where among the monster trio, Luffy and Sanji can fly, but Zoro can't fly. So when it comes to a matchup, good and bad matchups, a flying mobile opponent for Zoro is a bad matchup, i.e. the dragon on Punk Hazard. He had to use Usopp's Trampolia to bounce off of that and actually attack the dragon, because he can't fly. And then some folks may want to bring up Monet, but considering the involvement of Nami and Robin, and then later on Tashigi, then Zoro holding back because she was a woman, and how she was a Logia snow user that went into the snow and merged with the snow and all these different things, it is very apparent that someone like Monet does not operate in the same way as someone like Appel or Marco in terms of aerial combat. That is very, very clear. It's just not a good matchup for Zoro in terms of how King so far has operated innately as a fighter. Number two, in the anime, keywords there of course, in the anime, episode 924, King does a flaming kick in order to knock off Big Mom's ship, the Channer ship, from the waterfall. The flaming kicks of King need to be matched. people. It's in the terminology. We don't see what exactly happens in the manga. All you see is like an impact, and that was it. But in the anime, those details are as clear as day.
Clear as crystal.
The man devil legs up. Now, of course, there is that extreme caveat of, well, it's the anime. The anime, at the end of the damn day, when it comes to, I would argue, most anime in the shonen sphere, they are just interpretations of the manga. And sometimes, because of that interpretation, they get things wrong. Like, for example, Gear Second Luffy at the very beginning. I'm not gonna forget about that. No. I am not going to forget about that. I don't care what Oda said about, oh my god, well, no, I don't care. They got it wrong. Simply put, they got it wrong. So that's part of the reason why, when we're gauging these things, we have to lead first and foremost by the main canon material, which in the case of shonen tend to be the manga. But I will acknowledge for sure that in the Wano Country anime in One Piece so far, they've been doing, for the most part, the Lord's work. They've been doing a very good job through and through, adding scenes that actually make a lot more sense in the anime compared to the manga. Truly, honestly. So the anime, he does do that, and I do acknowledge that. And then going from there, if that is the case where it was a flaming kick, because again, the manga you can't really tell. But if it is a flaming kick against the Chandership, then number 3, his combat style so far doesn't seem to be predicated that much on the sword, but rather his own Delphood abilities. The very first attack that we see King do is an attack in Pterodon form that is not sword based. Compare that, let's say, Denjiro, when Denjiro at the time Kyoshiro, when he, let's say, fought against Zoro, this guy was a swordsman through and through. So at times in the story, when it comes to relatively new characters, when it comes to their first clash or their first fights, at the very beginning, you can kind of gauge their skill sets based on that first engagement, that first clash that they have. This applies to Don Chinja, it applies to Kuzan, it applies to Borsalino, it applies to Sakazuki, it applies to Sengoku, it applies to Ace, it applies to Hawkins, it applies to Apu, it applies to the myriad, the vast majority of the characters in the story, where when you see them use their powers or their skills, they tend to stick to that and expand upon that later on in the story where they get more screen time. And outliers, like for example CP9, where when we first see them as Galilea Company, they're doing sort of different things to when later on when we see them as CP9, to where they're doing the Rokushiki techniques in full. But again, those are outliers, and it tends to be so for storytelling reasons. Very seldomly do we see characters just completely deviate from their initial power and skill schemes in the story. These are things you can kind of gauge here or there when it comes to how the characters really fight. And yeah, again, King can use his sword, I'm not against that. But then going to the 4th point here, it doesn't seem that King is that gung-ho of a swordsman. He's been using so far his Zoan abilities through and through. So I had to zoom into a lot of these panels. I had to. In the latest chapter, 988, there are several panels where King does not have his sword on his hip, on his waist. But there is one panel, or one shot where he does. So I'm not too sure if King actually got a sword back from 2 chapters ago, 986. In that chapter, Izo shot the sword out of his hand. And in the latest chapter, most of the shots where we see King at the very beginning, on page 6, we don't see King with his sword on his waist. When he grabs Shinobu, we don't see the sword on his waist. When we see Sanji destroy the cuffs around Momo, King is looking right at that. We don't see the sword on his waist, but we do see the sword on his waist in the page after, on page 8. But then on the bottom of page 8, when he's fighting against Sanji, when Sanji's still in invisible mode, we don't see a sword on his waist. And then that continues on for the rest of the chapter. So this could be a drawing flaw, where either Oda forgot to draw the sword on him, or it's the reverse, he forgot to not draw the sword on King. Because in the same chapter, Sanji does not have his glasses on, his sunglasses. The sunglasses were there last time when he transformed into Raid Suit Sanji, but for some reason, the glasses aren't on now. So in Zoro's favor, it could be the case where Oda forgot to draw the sword on King's hip, but in Sanji's favor, the one panel where it's an outlier, where he has the sword on his waist when Momo appears to be floating or flying, that could have been the mistake. So essentially speaking, if that is the mistake, since it is the outlier among all the panels that we see in the latest chapter, because that's the evidence at hand, if that is the outlier, then that means in the last 2 chapters, when King got his sword shot out of his hand by Izo, King didn't care at all, or didn't care that much to get his precious sword back. That's what that means. King didn't care that much at all to get his precious sword back if King still does not have his sword at this current point in time. And based on most of the panels in the latest chapter, King apparently has not gotten his sword back. And as far as you know, King is not doing this Katakuri thing where he can hide the mole spear in his body. Like, he can hide the sword in his body. No. As far as you know, King ain't doing that stuff. So he's not like a Zoro, where if Zoro lost his sword, he'd go hunting for that. I mean, we saw that when it came to Gyukimaru, Benki. He lost his sword, it got stolen. Zoro was hunting for that. Yo, where's my sword? Let me go after this. I mean, we saw in Dressrosa too. Zoro will go through hell and high water to get his sword back. King doesn't seem to care. Even in Pterodon mode, I don't see King having his sword anywhere. Like, I'm zooming in pretty hard, and I don't see King's sword on him at all, even in Pterodon mode. And then finally, the last piece of evidence for Sanji versus King is, simply put, Sanji and King are already fighting. Sanji and King have already exchanged blows. Blow for blow, toe for toe at this point in time. Sanji and Zoro, for the most part in the series, do not get involved with one another opponents or one another fights for the vast majority of the series. You don't see, for example, Sanji fighting Ohm on Skypiea first and then Zoro fighting against Ohm later. No. Sanji fought against the ball guy with Usopp and Luffy. Zoro wound up fighting against Jabra alongside with Usopp in some weird meme 2-on-2 thing. But again, the first person Zoro ran into, the very first dude, was Kaku. And then on top of that, once the cuffs separated, once Usopp and Zoro were finally free of each other, Zoro went right for Kaku, and Usopp was on death's door until in came the hunter Sanji to take on Jabra. Sanji did not get involved with Hachi at all. Zoro did not get involved with Kurobi. Do you see what I'm getting at here? Zoro, not a single time does Zoro mess with Virgo, but Sanji does. On Fishman Island, Sanji does not fight against Hyuzo in any way, shape, or form. For the most part, throughout the entirety of the series, unless it winds up being a group thing, like for example with Oars, Luffy, Sanji goes one-on-one with Oars Luffy first, then it's a group battle. Then Zoro goes one-on-one after that, then it's a group battle after that. Unless it's gonna be a group thing, for the most part, Zoro and Sanji, thematically speaking, it's been consistent, do not get involved at all with one another's fights. They don't. They don't. Which is why, since King is already fighting against Sanji, that is pretty hard evidence for Sanji versus King. So those are the key 5 points in favor of Zoro's 2 points, I would argue, when it comes to Zoro versus King or Sanji versus King. Now, in all honesty, Sanji or Zoro should not be King one-on-one. Just play it simple. If King is around the level of Katakuri or even Smoothie, like if you want to bring King that low or Smoothie that high, depends on you, whatever, right? I would argue that there's been little evidence in the post-time skip to indicate that either Sanji or Zoro could beat someone of that caliber of power. Really. One-on-one, there is so much evidence against that. Honestly. If they do, whether it's going to be Zoro or Sanji, if they do beat King or any commander, for that matter, in the Beast Pirates one-on-one, then I would argue it's older power creep. Yeah, true, they got power-ups. You know, Zoro with the Enma, Sanji with the raid suit. fair enough, fine. But if they do win against Commanders one-on-one, then I would say that is for sure owed to power creep, 100%. And I would still say that it should be Marco versus King. So it could be the case where Sanji gets help from Marco, or it could be the case where it's going to be Sanji and Marco, or it could be even Zoro and Sanji. I would love to see a Zoro and Sanji team up together, the return of the infamous Davy Back duo. That would be dope as all hell. That would be dope as all hell if it was Zoro and Sanji teaming up 1-on-2 against the Calamity. And again, when it comes to Marco and King, that I think should absolutely happen, considering how Marco and King, they did the same thing to the Channer ship. Though to be fair, during Zou, in a flashback of Dressrosa, we do see Sanji's plan against the Channer ship, and Sanji does damage the Channer ship with the cannonballs they set ablaze. So, King, Marco, and Sanji have done similar things to the Channer ship. And King, Sanji, and Marco have all fire-based powers. So yeah, you can kind of force it in there. You can kind of, push it in there. Ain't no big deal. Yeah, baby, ain't no big deal. At the end of the day.
But at the end of the day,
is Zoro versus King a possibility? Yes, because anything can happen in this arc. Anything can happen in this war, truly. However, at this point in time, it is a much lower possibility given all the evidence at hand. It is a much lower possibility ever since Sanji and King clashed. What I see this clash so far being is, I guess, Sanji's Appu equivalent. Luffy and Kid and Zoro got damaged by Scratchman on Appu. So they're coming to some of these fights a little bit wounded. And in the case of Sanji, he's kind of fresh. King can do damage to Sanji just how Zoro and Luffy and Kid got damaged by Appu. That's how it's turning out so far at a bare minimum. But it can easily play out where it's going to be a full-on fight between the two. And then where that goes, only Oda knows. But on that note, guys and gals, that is it for this video. Let me know where you stand on the subject matter at hand. Be sure to rate the video. It is not that hard to do because I guarantee you all have a device called Zamasu. You use Zamasu to click, rate the video, to click, subscribe, to click on that bell to join the squad. And of course, as always, feel free to, please do, comment in the comment section down below. Peace, and have a nice goddamn day.